Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and today I'm taking you over the best $700 gaming PC build for the months of October, November and December 2016. We're getting into those Christmas months now, and this really would be a great holiday or Christmas present for somebody. So let's go over the performance, and then I'll go over the parts that make it all possible. This build is going to smash the latest AAA titles at 1080p ultra settings with anti-aliasing on, a bit of ambient occlusion, and even textures cranked up a little bit. The likes of The Witcher 3, Battlefield 1, GTA 5, Overwatch, Star Wars Battlefront, all those kind of games are going to be seeing some really great performance. In terms of slightly older games, you're looking at 1440p in the likes of CSGO, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, and even Minecraft if you did want to play that on a $700 gaming PC. Not to mention it's also VR capable. The GPU we've gone for is very much a great card for VR, so if you had a HTC Vive or an Oculus Rift, you are covered. And if you want to get a VR headset in the near future, this build has got you facilitated as well. So let's kick it off with the CPU. For the CPU, I went for Intel's Core i5-6500. It comes in clocked at 3.2 GHz, which is healthy. It isn't overclockable, however if you buy an overclockable CPU, you do tend to pay a price premium. It's a quad-core CPU, guaranteeing compatibility with all the latest AAA titles, and the CPU fits under the recommended specs for a lot of the latest games. It's well above that if it's not mentioned as the recommended CPU. Going for an i7 for gaming is simply overkill, and anyone that tells you need an i7 for gaming clearly doesn't know what they're on about. There's no point in spending more money on your CPU when you can pump that into your graphics card, your RAM, your other components, that kind of thing, and it's a really solid chip for this build. In terms of motherboard, it isn't going to directly affect performance, however you want something that looks half decent, comes in a nice easy to build in form factor, and comes from a reputable manufacturer. The ASUS H110M-A is a Maicro ATX motherboard. That plonks it right in between the full-size ATX and the mini ATX, the biggest and smallest kind of mainstream variants of motherboards, allowing a much easier build process and also giving you the best value. It's on the H110M chipset, which is very capable. You don't need to go up to Z170 unless you want to have like 8 hard drives and SSDs and to overclock your CPU. If you went for an overclockable CPU, you would need a more beefy motherboard, but because we haven't, we don't need to splurge on a motherboard with extra heat sinks and heat spreaders, that kind of thing. With that being said, this motherboard does support RAM up to 2133 MHz in speed and also 32 GB of it. We've also got good support in terms of SATA 3.6 gigabit per second for any hard drives or SSDs you may want, and it comes from ASUS, so you know it's going to be alright. In terms of RAM, another reputable manufacturer, it's from Corsair. This is their Vengeance LPX. Now I have a kind of a personal favourite towards this RAM. I've got 32 gigs of it in my system. It was the first RAM I ever bought, the DDR3 variant, and 8 GB is great for gaming, especially at this price point. DDR4 2400 MHz speed is also super nice, and the black colour on this RAM is nice and stealth and fits in with the colour scheme I've gone for in this build. In terms of storage, preferably you want an SSD and a hard drive, but sometimes that just isn't able to be facilitated in the budget. So instead I went for a Seagate Barracuda 1TB hard drive. It's a 7200 RPM speed, which is as fast as mainstream kind of consumer hard drives, and if you did want to add an SSD in here as well, I'll leave a link to an optional SSD in the description below, as I'll leave links to every single part mentioned. Not to mention my $750 gaming PC build will add a couple of things, including an SSD. 1TB, however, of hard drive storage is plenty for your Steam library, movies and your music, and of course it's a PC. So say in 6 months time, oh bam, I've got $50, you can go and grab yourself an SSD or another hard drive if you wished to increase upon performance. In terms of the graphics card, this was a bit of a difficult choice for me. Nvidia have recently released their GTX 1060 and AMD have recently released their RX 480. They're pretty level-headed, however the 1060 does seem to be the preferred card and is slightly more expensive, warranting some slightly better performance. So I went for the 1060. It's an MSI card, which is super nice. It comes in a black and white colour scheme. It's got two nice large fans to keep the GPU cool and dissipate all that heat, and it's got a 6 GB frame buffer. Now that is a tad overkill, however I didn't want to go for a 3 GB variant, so a GTX 1060 with 3 GB of VRAM, as that may be slightly inhibiting in some games. The 6 GB cards also tend to be slightly higher spec and have slightly better coolers, and it's from MSI, so you know it's going to do the job just fine, if I can even speak. In terms of the case, the Corsair Carbide Spec M2 is definitely a preferred chassis in my opinion. I could have gone for something cheaper. I could have spent $30 instead of $53 on something like Thermaltake's Versa H21. However, if you have a $700 build and your mate comes round to have a look at it and it looks like a pile of crap, then, you know, there is extreme cases. You could go and spend the bare minimum on everything and just get rid of aesthetics completely, but it would be loud, it would look ugly, and it might actually sacrifice performance in some areas. Airflow is really important to stop parts thermal throttling. Thermal throttling, if you don't know, is when parts get too hot to actually slow themselves down in order to produce less heat. This case isn't going to let that happen. It's got plenty of airflow, and it comes from Corsair, a very reputable manufacturer of cases. The Maicro ATX mid-tower form factor also facilitates for our motherboard just fine, and not for any motherboards that are bigger, meaning this is going to fit nicely under a desk or inside of a room, studio, office, a gaming room, or a bedroom. So a perfect choice with USB 2, USB 3 and HD audio connectivity. Finally, to wrap it all off, the power supply. Many people really screw up, in my opinion, when they pick the power supply. They either go, oh, I need 1200 watts, you don't, or they go, yeah, that'll do, 200 watts, that's fine by me. No. Instead, I went for the EVGA 600B. It's 600 watts, which is a tiny bit overkill, but not half as much overkill as something like 800, because this build only consumes 270. That being said, the lowest power supplies you could tend to get are 430 watts, and they tend to be lower rated. Not to mention, this has got an 80 plus bronze certification, which is going to guarantee the efficiency of the unit, and also save you some money at the wall. If you didn't know, energy can never escape. It just gets converted into different forms. It will go through to the power supply as electricity, and many cheaper units will actually waste a lot of that energy as it converts into heat. This power supply will make sure as much as possible goes through to your actual components, and as least possible gets wasted, saving you on your energy bills. Not to mention, it's from EVGA, who are once again a reputable manufacturer, something I cannot stress enough when picking PC parts. But that wraps it up for this build. If you did enjoy, please do drop a like rating. I urge you to subscribe if you haven't already. Check out some of my other content. I've got reviews, PC build guides, gaming PCs, that kind of thing. So just head over to the channel and have a look. But I'll leave links to everything mentioned in today's video in the description below. You can also see the playlist of all my gaming PC builds for 2016. But if it's getting up to Christmas when you're watching this, have a good Christmas. That feels so weird to say in October. But as always, I'll see you in the next GeekaWhat video.